right, so I just want to show how to make one of these cropping frames. So I've got one made already. You have to have two of them, and I would recommend a minimum of 8 inches, 8 inches long on either side, because you need to have excuse me, you need to have enough flexibility that you can cover. You can frame an area sort of like this, of a drawing like this. Okay, so I'm going to create a second frame, and I have my black paper. I've got my cutting mat, and I'm just going to draw. I said 8-inch minimum, so I'm just going to mark out 8 inches. Basically, I'm going to make an 8-inch square out of this paper. So let's just cut this into a square. And this doesn't have to be perfect, but I do recommend that you use an X-Acto knife, because using a scissors, it's not going to give you straight edges. I know that no matter how hard you try with the scissors, they are not going to be perfectly straight. Okay, so I'm going to make mine 1.5 inches wide, but the exact width is really not super important. But I found that that's, I don't know, it just seemed about right. You know, if yours is 2 inches, or I don't think you want to make them narrower than 1.5 though. I mean, now that I mention that, because the idea of the cropping frame is that you're blocking out part of the drawing that you don't want to see. So if you make them too narrow, then I think that you might be a bit distracted by some of the drawing that's showing on the other side. All right, so that's it. It's pretty simple, and I have my drawing. This stuff over here was something that I demoed, so we'll just pretend that that doesn't exist. But basically, what you're doing is you're going to be cropping using these two frames. You want a square area, and you can move it around to different parts of the drawing, because basically what you're doing is you're abstracting. My arm is maybe in the way, but you're abstracting this drawing, and you can make, you can zoom, kind of like zoom in. So make a smaller square to get really close in, or you can make it larger, so you get a larger area. All right, so again, abstract this object so that it becomes just positive and negative shapes. Okay, so I did just want to mention something. I'm assuming that some of you have maybe never used an X-Acto knife before, and never used a X-Acto and cut with an X-Acto and a ruler before. So I just want to mention that I have seen students who have never done this before take the point of the X-Acto, like hold it basically like this, and try to cut, and it does not make a good cut. You cannot cut with the point. I tried it over here too. It makes a very rough cut, and that is not what you want. So the way to do this properly is you want to make sure that you have your ruler. You want to put pressure on it enough so that this ruler doesn't slide, and just make sure your fingers aren't anywhere near the edge. And then take the X-Acto, and you want to put it in an angle. So basically you should be cutting more with this flat edge. And so you're cutting like this, and you're just putting pressure on it. You don't have to put too much pressure. Well, it actually depends on what you're cutting. So I'm just cutting some sort of thin paper here, and I don't need a lot of pressure to cut all the way through. But if you have some kind of heavier board, you might have to, put a little bit more pressure. But what I would recommend is, if you have a heavier board, you're going to go 2 or 3 times until you're all the way through. So don't try to put so much pressure if you've got something like a mat board thickness, to go all the way through in one pass. All right, but it's really important then that you do not move the ruler. So that's why I say put pressure on the ruler, and then, 2 or 3 times or whatever it takes to get through the material that you're cutting.